Good evening, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us. The sign-in sheet for those who are taking this for diocesan credit is going around. So we are moving forward to our third session of 5. This one is on sin, evil, domination, and the corruption of the good. Any questions before we begin? Then let's go. As we begin this session, we arrive at a necessary turning point in the series. In earlier sessions, we considered Tolkien's life and faith, and we saw that his imagination is deeply marked by a Catholic vision of reality. We also reflected on creation, subcreation, and the goodness of what God has made. It matters because Tolkien does not begin with darkness. He doesn't begin with chaos or with a universe that is trapped between two equal powers, one good and one evil. He begins in a manner profoundly fitting for a Catholic imagination, which is gift. Begins with a world that is good because it comes from the hand of God. He begins with order, beauty, meaning, and praise. And precisely because he begins there, he can show with unusual clarity what evil truly is. For that reason, this session must begin with a reminder. Evil, in Tolkien, is never a rival act of creation. Evil does not make in the highest sense. It cannot give being. It cannot call forth goodness from nothing. It cannot sing a world into existence. What it can do is far more parasitic and in some ways far more dreadful. It can wound. It can distort. It can possess. It can corrupt. Ultimately, it can take what is good and bend it inward. So if session 2 then was concerned with the splendor of created goodness, session 3 today must reckon with its contradiction. Corrupted goodness, desecrated goodness, goodness made to serve rebellion. That's why that's also why the biblical background matters here. The fall in Genesis does not begin, again, with open ugliness. It begins with distrust. It begins with the suggestion that our creatureliness is not enough, that the gift of our life is not enough, that obedience is too small a thing for beings made in the image of God. It's the words of the serpent in the garden, "You will be like gods." And there, in such a few words, is the ancient temptation. The creature does not wish merely to receive, the creature wishes to seize. The heart no longer receives the world as gift, but reaches for mastery. And from that wound come the long consequences of sin: alienation, shame, disorder, blame, violence, and of course death. And in the Christian tradition and in Tolkien's moral world, sin is never merely the breaking of a rule. It is rebellion against right order. It is the soul curved inward. It is freedom misused. It is the creature refusing to remain creature. And this is why the church insists that evil is not a positive substance in itself. Evil is not dark material existing alongside the good. Rather, it's corruption of the good. It is a lie is the corruption of speech. Tyranny is the corruption of authority. Lust is the corruption of love. Desecration, the corruption of reverence. So too in Tolkien. His darkest figures are not terrifying because they create a second universe. They are terrifying because they deform the one that they have received. They mock what they cannot truly make. They twist what they cannot originate. They exercise a kind of false making, a parody, if you will, of subcreation, which turns gift into possession, stewardship into domination. And that brings us to the central theme, domination. Not all power is evil, and not all authority is corrupt. Tolkien doesn't oppose order or hierarchy, rule or strength. Belong to the Catholic Church. We do all those things very well. But he is relentless in exposing a particular sickness of the will, the desire to not just govern, but to control. Domination is power severed from service. It is authority cut loose from humanity. And in Tolkien's Legendarium, that urge appears again and again as one of evil's clearest marks. So to make this session understandable, especially for those of you who have not read any of his works, let me briefly introduce some of the principal characters that I'll introduce for us today. First, there is Melkor or Morgoth, whom we have already met last week. He's the great rebel at the beginning of Tolkien's mythology from the Silmarillion. He's not just some ordinary villain in a cartoon sense. He's the first great image of spiritual rebellion. In Tolkien's creation story, the Ainulindale, the world begins in harmony and a great music. Melkor does not create a rival music of his own. He introduces discord into what was already been given. He's the figure of pride on the highest scale, the creature who will not receive his place, who will not join the harmony, who wants not to participate, but to be rival. From there, then we move on to Feanor, one of the most gifted and brilliant beings in Tolkien's world. He's an artist, a maker, a craftsman, and he creates the Silmarils, which the book is named after. And the Silmarils are jewels of surpassing beauty. And see, what his problem becomes is not that he loves something evil, it's that he clings possessively to something beautiful. He helps us see one of Tolkien's deepest moral insights. The corruption does not necessarily begin with hatred, but in the disordered love of a real good. Ultimately, Feanor shows us greatness turned inward. From there, then, we move on to Sauron, the Dark Lord that I'm sure almost everyone has at least heard the name of. Sauron is not evil because he's violent. He's evil because he seeks total control. He wants submission, command, the reduction of all lesser wills into extensions of his own. He's the purest image of domination. If Melkor is rebellion at the beginning, Sauron is domination brought to mature form. And closely bound to Sauron is the One Ring, perhaps the single most famous object in fantasy literature. Yet the ring is not just magic jewelry. It's concentrated power bent toward mastery. It tempts people by offering effectiveness. It whispers victory, safety, protection, and control. It tells the bearer that good ends can be secured through dominating means. For that reason, it is especially dangerous to those who still love some genuine good. And that is where Boromir appears in the story. Boromir is a man of Gondor, a nobleman, brave, loyal, who loves his people and wants to save them. But he becomes tempted by the ring because he begins to imagine that power can be seized for a righteous purpose. Then we move to Sauron, the great wizard who falls through pride, calculation, and indeed the desire for control. He's one of Tolkien's most modern figures of corruption. It's intelligence but without humility. It's order without goodness. And it is the use of mechanization. Sauron does not work only through armies and machinery and open force. He also works through subtler means. And then we have at this point where Grima Wormtongue arrives on scene. Grima is not grand. He's a man of Rohan. He is small. He's mean. More personal. He represents corruption through whisper, flattery, insinuation, and the slow poisoning of judgment. Through him, we see that domination does not always arrive first with iron and fire. Sometimes it enters a hall through counsel, exhaustion, and the weakening of a ruler's clarity. Grima, therefore, helps us see another face of evil in Tolkien, not only brute force, but the corruption of speech, perception, and trust. He will matter especially when we consider Saruman's methods and the way evil can hollow out a kingdom from within before it openly seizes control of it. And then finally, no discussion of sin and evil and corruption would be complete without a discussion of Gollum, the most haunting portrait of what sin does to a person over time. Once he was just an ordinary creature, closely related to the hobbits. But he's gradually narrowed, twisted, and divided by possessiveness and vice. In him, evil becomes intimate and deforming. And he shows us truly what a soul looks like when it's made smaller by repeated surrender to evil. As we move through these figures, keep one principle clearly before you. Evil, once again, is most intelligent when we see it as the corruption of gift. Melkor corrupts harmony. Feanor corrupts greatness. Sauron corrupts rule. The ring corrupts desire for good into lust for mastery. And Boromir reveals how even courage and love can be bent toward coercion. Saruman corrupts wisdom. Grima corrupts counsel. Gollum corrupts the self. So in this session, we speak mostly about the soul's disorder, about what happens when creatures meant to receive, to steward, and to love seek to possess and to control. It is about the terrible ingenuity of sin, which cannot create but can only desecrate. And it is about learning to recognize through Tolkien's moral imagination that the deepest evils are often not those that appear wholly different, but those that arise when good itself is distorted and bent out of shape. So now, we begin. First and foremost, we begin here with the logic of sin. We discuss a discussion on rebellion, on corruption, and again on domination. We begin with Melkor. And Melkor, remember, was one of the created beings from the beginning who was empowered by the one God to sing creation into being. But what he does is he implements his own desire. So created spirits who participate in great harmony, but he does not create in this, in injecting his own sense of what he wants. He does not create, he actually rebels against the order. Of course, the church here describes for us this idea of sin as rebellion. As the theme progressed, it came into the heart of Melkor to interweave matters of his own imagining that were not in accord with the theme of Iluvatar. For he sought therein to increase the power and glory of the part assigned to him. So what does Melkor want? He wants distinction. He wants power. He wants to be self-assertive over the gift. He wants ultimately to rival, in a certain way, the one Creator God. And what we have here in the end is Melkor's rejection of his own creation. Not in the one way, not in a considered way where we speak about, I don't want to be here, but the idea of being, rejecting the idea of his own creation, in that he desires to be his own progenitor. He desires to be the master and the ruler of his own life. He wants to create. And if you remember about last week where we talked about subcreation, the fact that created beings made in the image of a creator God desire to create. But when we do it out of order, when we do it for our own desire, that's when things go sideways. So in the Ainulindale, again, the creation story from Tolkien's The Silmarillion, bigger book, evil begins not with any sort of created order. Evil does not begin with a bang. Evil begins in distortion, disorder, and discord. So what Melkor does is Melkor Morgoth, what he does is he sets us up for the entire rest of the story by placing this in the very beginning of the timeline of Middle-earth. What Melkor becomes is the epitome. He's the pattern for all later evil. Again, understanding that evil doesn't make. Evil does not generate fullness of being. Every later corruption in Middle-earth echoes this first spiritual rebellion. I think as we look back to our first session where we talked about Tolkien's life, to see that, again, reminding ourselves that his Catholic formation, which shaped by his mother, shaped by Father Morgan, understanding a moral and fully Catholic understanding, but also seeing destruction and despair, seeing the early death, not even knowing his father, but seeing the death of his mother whom he loved, being tossed around from home to home in a land where his faith literally made him an outsider. So understanding and seeing that the goodness of the world and coming to know the goodness that he has received through his faith, and yet seeing all of the negative, all of the bad, all of the rejection of that good in his whole life. Even up through his participation in World War I and beyond, seeing his sons go to war with Germany in World War II, and everything that we can do to each other to inflict pain and misery. So moving forward then, we recognize there that rebellion is the root of evil. Rebellion is what is at its core. Also recognizing once more, pulling again back from this idea that evil cannot create. What evil is the corruption of something good. So Melkor desires to create, yet he cannot. So what does he do? He takes what has been given to him and tries to bend it to his own will. And what we end up happening in the creation is this like disharmony that enters into the song of creation. Later, it's the distortion and the corruption of elves that become become the first orcs, distorted, twisted. But we also have to remember that Tolkien is Catholic. So evil is also not dualistic. It's not the good and the bad versus one-on-one. There's no co-eternal kingdom of darkness. It is ultimately subjected to the rule of the one God. And here, again from the Undimmed, and thou, Melkor, this is Eru Iluvatar, the one God speaking to Melkor. And thou, Melkor, shalt see that no theme may be played that hath not its uttermost source in me, nor can any alter the music in my despite. For he that attempteth this shall prove but mine instrument in the devising of things more wonderful, which he himself hath not imagined. And this is the next paragraph in the story. And Melkor was filled with shame, of which came secret anger. When we become shamed, when we feel like we're not treated right, when we face all of the rejection that comes from doing something wrong, when we attribute that to ourselves, when shame takes over, we need to protect ourselves. That's where anger comes from. He's angry. And that anger will be sent. And it's the exact same thing that he does, or it's the reason that he does everything that he does in the rest of the story. Yes?
He's my
Yeah.
hand raiser. Can you go back one slide? I think it was the Catechism 405. Yeah.
Yes.
I think that touches or it hits the question I asked last week. It's probably on the DVD now.
Yes.
Where we're talking about goodness being of God the Creator, and then any lack of goodness is the corruption of it after that. And then talking about the fall of Adam being corrupted and then kind of inheriting that corruption. And this kind of draws like a picture of being created originally holy, but then having that holiness corrupted. Like there's nothing created there, it's corrupted.
Right.
So then we have to suffer through that. Now through baptism, we get cleansed of that, re-holyized, I guess, whatever, made holy again, and then we're still battling through that as
Right.
it continues to be corrupted.
Yeah, because so exactly. I got nothing more to add to that.
No, I wrote down that 405 because that's something to ponder in terms of understanding that. So when you're talking about the anger in the next slide, trying to understand that it's just that corruption of the goodness that we battle. Instead of being angry at ourselves in the fault, it's like, no, that's just the aspect of that corruption.
Oh, absolutely.
Trying to understand that it's like, no, we're still good. It was that corrupted part that we fell in.
Yeah, and of course the anger here is Melkor could never possibly be wrong. How dare you suggest otherwise? So the anger is not turned inward. It's not self-reflective. It's not looking at what I've done wrong. It's automatically saying, how dare you? So the further corruption that starts in the heart of rebellion that leads to further, again, the heart of rebellion that leads into corruption. That's just perpetuated further.
And that's a hard battle where you just want to recoil into, like, no, I didn't do wrong. Like, you go through all the justifications on how you're still okay.
Right.
But it's a result of, and then anger could result from it. So we're just being Melkor.
Yes. Essentially, yes. We're all just being Melkor.
Would be rooted in pride, right?
Yes. And it's exactly it. I mean, pride is I think Thomas refers to pride as it's like the root of every other vice that we have. Because ultimately we end up just sinking down into the idea that my ego was hurt. The I was rejected in some way. So and of course pride is not necessarily a bad thing. It's an unhealthy sense of pride that is overemphasized. Okay, so that is Melkor. Again, we're at the origin of rebellion, the origin of corruption. Now we move to Feanor, and for that I actually have a retelling basically of his story and how it plays out. So, who is Feanor? We met him in the very beginning. So who is Feanor? Feanor, we're beginning in Tolkien's mythology, before the events of the Lord of the Rings, we're past the creation of the Ainulindale. We're now into I believe we're in the first age of Middle Earth. There arose among the elves a prince of amazing ability, who is Feanor. He was not weak, but he was mighty of mind, fierce in spirit, and he had an unmatched ability to create, to craft. So if we understand his fall, we understand that Feanor begins with the desire to create something that is splendor. So he belonged to the Noldor, which were a race of elves that were known for their wisdom, skill, their memory, their language, lovers of beauty and shapers of beautiful things. So Feanor's name means, or it carries a sense of a spirit of fire and wonder that is just a restless, intense understanding of his spirit. So he does not merely appreciate beauty, he has the power to bring it forth. He's, in a sense, one of Tolkien's clearest examples of the nobility of subcreation, the creature who, having received the world from God, answers by making something worthy, radiant, and true. So Feanor appears as a man who loves beauty, excellence, and work, but particularly loves the work of his own hands. And that's something dangerous because I think it hits close to home for us. But it's understanding that like an outright wickedness, being face to face with the most evil thing possible, it repels us. We don't ever choose the outwardly wicked and evil thing. But a disordered love of something good has the ability to capture us. So Feanor is a portrait of corruption born from a greatness, a sense of wonder of his own, but again turned inward to himself. And the thing that he is famous for is creating the Silmarils. Again, the Silmarillion is the book. The Silmarils are what they're named for, what the book is named for. The Silmarils are 3 jewels. Not really sure exactly how they were crafted. Tolkien doesn't tell us. But inside of them contains the light of the two trees of Valinor, the great paradise of Middle-earth. And the trees of Valinor were the blessed lights that illuminated the world before the sun and the moon were created. So the Silmarils are the nearest thing that we can understand of carrying this sense of original or of like prime, like light radiance. So the tragedy here of Feanor then is not that his work is false. Tolkien does not mock craftsmanship, nor does he despise his artistic genius. He honors them. But Feanor's making is a real glory. And his tragedy begins there. It's a dangerous place when a true gift becomes bound too tightly to the self. And once the Silmarils are made, Feanor's relationship to them changes. Because he does not just simply delight in their beauty, he clings to them. He identifies himself with them. They become more than just works. They're expressions of his own identity. What he has made, he now holds as a possession. And beauty, which should have led to gratitude, begins instead to harden into possession. Now here's where we see this spiritual woundedness start to open up. And this is why Feanor matters theologically as well, because he shows us that sin often begins, once more, not in the love of evil, but in the disordered love of something good. The problem is not beauty. The problem is the possessiveness. A created good, however, cannot bear the weight of the ultimate reality. So Feanor begins to treat the Silmarils as though they were beyond all claim, beyond sacrifice, beyond obedience to anything else. They were the one thing that mattered. See, he won't not even receive correction for anything done wrong. He will not endure their loss. He won't let go. And that's his corruption. His talents are real. His craftsmanship is real. His intensity is real. And his love for what is beautiful is real. But all of it begins to slowly curve back into the self. Feanor no longer stands before beauty as a steward. He stands before it as an owner in the deepest and most absolute sense. He has made something wonderful, and now he cannot bear that it should belong in any way to a world beyond himself. Now, this is why his story is so important. It's easy to recognize sin when it appears as cruelty or open hatred. It's harder to recognize when it appears as something bright. Yet that's where one of Tolkien's sharpest moral insights, the higher the gift, the more terrible the ruin when the gift is bent out of shape. So Feanor becomes a warning to artists that one may begin by honoring beauty and end by worshiping one's own power to produce it. Warning to leaders that greatness can become isolation. This choice that he makes ultimately does not remain within himself. It darkens his judgment, it hardens his heart, it disorders his relationships, it sets motion in grief. And what began as his own possession of a thing becomes the force of destruction far beyond the self. So when we look at Feanor, we're not studying just an ancient elvish prince, but it's a meditation on the spiritual peril of a giftedness without humility. See, and this is why I believe his fall matters. He teaches that corruption of the good is often more tragic than the obvious presence of evil. When greatness itself is wounded, the wound runs deep. When beauty is seized rather than received, it becomes heavy. And when the creature begins to say of some finite good, "This is mine," the shadow has already entered the heart. And in one sentence, I think, holding together the entire story that Feanor offers us. The story of the Quenta Silmarillion, with the arrival of Feanor and the creation of the Silmarils, it's the possession of the Silmarils that leads to destruction, leads to the death of almost an entire race of the elves, that leads to the pulling away of the Ainur from interaction with Middle-earth, to the point where the entire world is bent so you can't get there. Ultimately, it leads to his death, as he rather vaingloriously attempts to confront Melkor himself. So we've had rebellion. Rebellion in the heart leads to a continued corruption of the heart, of the person. Interior corruption will ultimately lead to a desire for outward movement. And that's where we encounter Sauron. To understand Sauron, we must begin by seeing that he is not merely a destroyer, not simply a monster who loves ruin for its own sake. In Tolkien's world, Sauron is more dangerous than that. He's a figure of ordered evil, which is almost a contradiction in terms. He wants rule, control, submission, and the bending of every lesser being to his will. So, who is Sauron? If we've never read Tolkien, well, at first to say that Sauron did not begin in chaos. He was originally, again, a powerful being of spirit, a lesser of the Ainur. He was a Maiar, but the West, he's a spiritual being, of like an angelic being. He's marked by an intelligence and a skill, and because of this, he's probably one of the more dangerous, when he's the most dangerous, once we get into The Lord of the Rings. So in order to understand Sauron, we must understand him through the lens of domination. He does not want to just defeat his enemies. He wants to possess agency over them. He wants a world in which lesser beings no longer move freely according to their own good, but are drawn and pressed into obedience, into submission. He seeks unity, but not the unity of friendship. He seeks order, but not order in light of justice. What he desires is unity without any of that. He wants the world arranged as an extension of his own command. There's again, understanding that authority is not necessarily a bad thing. Again, recognizing that Tolkien grew up in a hierarchical church. He grew up in an English society that still has a monarch. So authority and hierarchy are not seen in and of themselves as something bad or wrong. But domination reduces those things as means to the end. More than that, it reduces people as means to an end.
Father, did he see himself as a god?
Yes. Did Sauron see himself as a god? He saw himself, recognized it was much like Melkor wanted to rival Eru. Sauron became... It's hard because I don't know, now that I start to think about it. Can't quite say he thought himself a god, but he did think himself as the rightful ruler of all Middle-earth, of all of Arda, the planet. And that what he was searching for was not just he was cloaking it in the language of harmony and unity and bringing about goodness. But of course, understanding fully that that's not at all what he was doing.
But for him to be in charge and control brought him joy in the wrong way.
Brought him, I'm sorry?
Brought him joy and happiness, but in the wrong way.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's something, too, that it's interesting, because can we really say that Sauron was ever happy? The more that you give yourself over to this desire for more and more, and you're never truly satisfied, is there ever true joy?
It's very sad to think about.
Yeah.
Very, very sad.
And I think that's part of what we're seeing here is that the more and he's dressing up, what Sauron ends up doing is dressing up a lot of what he's like this language of unity, the language of for the good is always about order. It's the language of order, when in fact all he's doing is bending everything to his own personal devices. What he sees as the good. And of course, always disconnected from the true good.
I remember watching the movie, you said about the trees.
Mm-hmm.
I remember watching the movie and he ordered for these beautiful trees to be basically shut down into the earth, and then these orcs do whatever they want to do with them.
Mhm.
But I remember watching, I thought, why is he doing this? And now I understand why he was doing this.
Hold on to that. We're going to come back to that soon.
Okay.
So I think it's also important to remember that this, as we have this further discussion, that we're not trying to reduce Sauron to this two-dimensional caricature of a villain. He is not a Scooby-Doo villain. That's not what Tolkien is doing here. He's three-dimensional. He is fleshed out. He is complicated. He is complex, and in the sense that what happens when all things created good more and more hand themselves over to corruption and evil. Because again, understanding that you cannot have it contained only within yourself, it ends up spilling out.
Father?
Yes?
I was thinking, as you were saying, that instead of a two-dimensional villain, or get more or multi-dimensional villain. That it's like they have this ideal that they're aiming for, where they feel that's how it should be, not for the sake of evil, but for the sake of order, right?
Yeah.
So Tolkien's developing this very deep character that just has a very disordered view of how good should really be. Like he's going to recreate and make it his own will, bend it to his will. And it's interesting as you talked about the counter-type two-dimensional characters that aren't quite that good. They're the cheap villains. The stories that have those multi-dimension villains, like, not that you like them more, but you can really see where you're like, it's that twistedness. Like they're really aiming for what they truly believe to be the way it should be. Like Thanos in the Marvel series, or the Sith Lords in Star Wars. Like they're not just trying to be evil, like they think it's supposed to be that way.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I think one of the things that Tolkien was drawing from was his own life experience because of Marxism. What you have up here, what you've been talking about, mirrors Marxism to a T.
Interesting.
It really does. I've studied Marxism, so I know.
Right.
Some people have lived under it. So, yeah. You look when, Marxism came to fruition in actually 1917 in the Soviet Union. But even before that, all of their philosophy had been in the schools in Europe and also in Oxford and other places. Very much aware of it. It was utopia on earth.
Interesting.
I couldn't hear everything you were saying. Did I hear you say that Marxism was arising at the time of Tolkien, and he incorporated this order and everything? Like, okay,
It was parallel.
yeah.
Once again.
Around turn of the century when
A little closer.
You got to put it
Right, yeah.
put it right in front of your
You
mouth.
want to eat it, yeah.
Unfortunately, it's the way it works.
I studied Marxism, and when Tolkien was a student and when he was writing The Lord of the Rings, he was very familiar with the philosophy and the tenets of Marxism. What Father has been sharing and talking about is exactly what Marxists think, Marxism and Marxists think, and what they want to achieve is this paradise on earth. They believe that they have to control everything to have this paradise on earth. So that's,
Thank you.
Go for it.
Rewind.
Trying to remember desperately what my point was. Yes, thank you. So again, the idea of the idea of domination being the corruption and the rebellion of the heart being poured out and imposed upon other people. And what we have here particularly is of course the creation of the rings themselves. They become the instruments of his own way of dominating, controlling them. But they're offered as gift, as something to be used for good. And we remember, I think it was last week that we saw the prologue to the Fellowship of the Ring, where it talks about the creation of the rings. And of course, he makes the one ring in secrecy. So here, this is from the Fellowship of the Ring. 9 he gave to mortal men, proud and great, and so ensnared them. Long ago they fell under the dominion of the One, and they became ring wraiths, shadows under his great shadow, his most terrible servants. In Tolkien's history story, men are the most easily to be corrupted by power. probably something he knew very well.
I looked at Father, I wondered then what the nine, what was the kings, and what was all their names? And it only gives you two, and it said that's just all
Yeah.
that was presented, was just two.
Yeah, who are the 9 kings of men? Yeah, is why the one we know is, well, at least the one that figures predominantly is the Witch King of Angmar. He's the leader of the 9. He's the one that stabs Frodo on Weathertop. Yeah. So, but we don't really have the names of the other ones.
Yeah. Now, when they were being chased, everybody got stabbed. You had all these men in black on the black horses. And I'm like, "Okay, these aren't the kings, right? I mean, they're black, but they are the kings.
Yep.
But in shadow, they're gray.
Yes. They are.
Okay.
They're not fully dead. They're not fully alive. They exist in this weird,
Shadow world.
exactly, shadow world.
Isn't it, I mean, I think it's well referred to as the men is like the favorite of Iluvatar. I always found that interesting that Sauron corrupted them the most easily as to, and then they also go to like heaven, right?
Yes.
Be with Iluvatar as well. The elves and the dwarves stay within the boundaries of the world,
Right.
creation. So
Yeah.
it's always that's kind of, I know it's supposed to be like our oral history as if it was lost, but I
Right.
always thought that was kind of a cool thing.
Absolutely, yeah. So the and touch on a little bit in at least I know next week, but yeah, that idea that the elves and men are what is called the children of Iluvatar. The elves are older; they're referred to as the Eldar. Men are the younger children of Iluvatar, but we are the ones who are able to be free of the cycle of being stuck in Middle Earth. The elves they go to this, kind of like when they die, they go to this like shadowy kind of underworld existence kind of thing. You can kill them, but they don't die. Like they don't die of old age. You can kill them, but they just, otherwise if you don't like kill them, they just kind of keep living and diminishing. Anyway. Yes. So Sauron creates the one ring that controls the other rings. This is Gandalf telling the story in the Fellowship to Frodo about what the ring is. So it is now the 9 he has gathered to himself, the 7 also, or else they are destroyed. The 3 are hidden still, but that no longer troubles him. He only needs the one. For he made that ring himself, it is his, and he let a great part of his own former power pass into it so that he could rule all the others. If he recovers it, then he will command them all again, wherever they be, even the 3. And all that has been wrought with them will be laid bare, and he will be stronger than ever. The ring is, well, it's the ring of the title, but it's one of the rings. The most powerful ring. It's the one ring. So it has the power to corrupt completely toward. I mean, it's an experience of this sort of like. I don't really know how. The best way I can really do it is to show you what it looks like. What happens when the ring. When you're faced with the ring, it's something that moves very subtle. It's something that the longer you possess it, the more it degrades you. It is an experience that the more that you use it, the faster it degrades you. And one of the things that we see is a desire. We mentioned Boromir. Yes.
Is that same key?
Yeah, essentially. That idea that, again, it has the ability, at least in theory, to help you control, which, of course, the ring was created with all of the evilness and the power that is Sauron, meaning that control here is not any sort of like ordered good. It is disordered. It is domination. So even if you try to use it for good, it will never work. This is Boromir. Boromir is the eldest son of the Steward of Gondor. He is a noble warrior. He is a valiant and storied fighter. He is someone that was able to hold back the tide of the orcs coming from Mordor. He is a man of Númenórean birth, or of bloodline, so he's got longer life, which would make sense if you... Anyway. We'll get to Númenor in a minute. Hopefully. The ring cannot be used for good. It can only corrupt. And that's essentially what we get here as we are in Rivendell, where the One Ring has been found. It is brought to Rivendell, where Elrond, the great prince of the elves in the northern part of Middle-earth, has gathered together all of the representatives of the free peoples of Middle-earth to figure out what to do with this thing.
Strangers from distant lands, friends of old, you've been summoned here to answer the threat of Mordor. Middle-earth stands upon the brink of destruction. None can escape. You will unite, or you will fall. Each race is bound to face this one. Bring forth the ring. Frodo.
A dream. I saw the eastern sky grow dark, but in the west a pale light lingered. A voice was crying, your doom is near at hand. Isildur's pain is found. Isildur's pain. Never before has any voice uttered the words of that tongue here in Middle-earth.
Do not ask your pardon, Master Elrond, for the black speech of Mordor may yet be heard in every corner of the West. The ring is altogether evil.
It is a gift to the foes of Mordor. Why not use this ring?
Long has my father, the Steward of Gondor, kept the forces of Mordor at bay. By the blood of our people are your lands kept safe. Keep Gondor the weapon of the enemy. Let us use it against him.
You cannot wield it. None of us can. The One Ring answers to Sauron alone. It has no other master.
And what would a Rangin know of this matter? This is no mere Rangin. He is Aragorn, son of Aragorn. You owe him your allegiance.
was heir. An heir to the throne of Gondor.
How did that help us?
Gondor has no king. Gondor needs no king.
Aragorn is right. We cannot use it.
So that's how it started. Here's how it ended.
That was strength. Pay no heed to that.
Where's Frodo?
None of us should wander alone.
You least of all. So much depends on you. Frodo? I know why you seek solitude. You suffer. I see it day by day. You sure you do not suffer needlessly? There are other ways, Frodo. Other paths that we might take.
I know what you would say, and it would seem like wisdom but for the warning in my heart.
Warning? Against what? We're all afraid, Frodo. But to let that fear drive us to destroy what hope we have. Don't you see that's madness?
There is no other way.
I ask only for the strength to defend what I believe. If you would but lend me the ring.
No,
Why do you recoil? I am no thief.
you are not yourself.
What chance do you think you will have? They will find you. They will take the ring. And you will beg for death before the end.
No. It is not your save by a happy chance. It should be mine. It should be mine. Give it to me. Give me.
I see your mind.
You will take the ring to Sauron. You will betray us.
You go to your death.
And the death of us all. Curse you. Curse you. And all our place.
Frodo? Frodo? Please, Frodo.
There was a little bit of time that passed between those two scenes, but what began with a desire for the good was wholly twisted by the actual ring itself, the desire for good. The use of evil means to accomplish a good can never occur. So, as we move from the ring, Boromir, whose desire started good, ended evil, what we end up moving from instead There's supposed to be a better quote there. I missed it. Is someone who desires the ring, but not with a good intention, but with his own intention in mind. And that's where we meet Sauron. This one's confusing. So, Sauron, Dark Lord. Sauron, wizard. Sauron, wizard. Angel, actually also an angel. But Dark Lord, trained completely by Morgoth, Melkor, was sent to Middle-earth to defeat Sauron. But again, the desire for the ring will corrupt and will corrupt always.
The world is changing. Who now has the strength to stand against the armies of Asgard and Mordor? To stand against the might of Sauron and Saruman. Union of the two towers. Together, my lord Sauron, we shall rule this Middle-earth.
The plan, of course, is that Saruman thinks he can betray Sauron and rule Middle-earth all by his onesie. Didn't quite end up that way. Now, what we saw here, too, there were two things going on. As we panned in, before we got into the little throne room area where Saruman was, I'll say it right eventually, we saw a lot of things happening, this mechanical thing, as Sauron turned everything from a green forest, from a place of nature and preserve, into an ironworks to create more of his super orcs, the Uruk-hai. Yes, goblins mixed with orcs. Thank you. What Saruman's goal here, again, is to conquer Middle-earth with Sauron. But what we see in work here is Tolkien's own, it's more than a wariness. Tolkien almost despised machines. What he saw first in World War I, then again witnessed in World War II, the age of the atomic bomb, what he saw was a gradual, as urbanization happened, what he saw was the receding of the green, of the nature of the natural, over to, well, I don't know what he'd think if he saw what we have now, but he'd probably lose his mind. But that's what we're seeing there as well, is this slowly receding sense of the natural created order for what we can make in order to dominate. So, we have talked about Melkor, who showed us rebellion. We have talked about Feanor, who showed us what corruption and disordered love looks like. We've talked about Sauron, who desires to dominate. The ring as the power that enslaves. And then Saruman, who is wise, but uses his wisdom that ultimately as a means to dominate. What we then see are these, we see what we're talking about there, that sense of corruption, machinery. That's the next part.
The world is changing. Who now has the strength to stand against the armies of Isengard and Mordor? To stand against the might of Sauron and Saruman? The union of the two towers. Together, by Lord Sauron, we shall rule this Middle-earth. The old world will burn with fires of industry. Forests will fall. A new order will rise. We will drive the machine of war with the sword and the spear and the iron fist of the orc. I want them armed and ready to march within 2 weeks.
Oh, my lord, there are too many. They cannot all be armed in time. We don't have the means.
Build a dam up the street, work the furnaces night and day.
We don't have enough fuel to feed the fire.
The forest of Fangorn lies on our doorstep. Burn it.
Yes.
We will fight for you. Swear it.
So, now that we've seen how rebellion, how corruption, how domination plays out in Middle-earth, we move to what that shape of corruption. So, what the effect of corruption on people, on a group of people, and then indeed on the world. And there really is no better example of what this looks like on an individual level than Gollum, the one we haven't talked about yet. The Catechism here speaks of this idea. So sin leads to further sin. It engenders vice by repetition of the same acts. It results in a perverse inclinations which cloud conscience and corrupt the concrete judgment of good and evil. Thus sin tends to reproduce itself and reinforce itself. Now the church also recognizes here, but it cannot destroy the moral sense at its root. So, cannot shake that base idea that we were, even though we continue to give ourselves over and over and over again to evil, that's still at the root, we're still created good. So, this is Gollum's story.
Why? Because it's my birthday and I want it. Precious.
And it actually goes downhill from there. So what we have here is how, so this is the beginning of Smeagol, his descent into Gollum. And if we understand, again, this idea that the Catechism is picking up on, it's only going to slowly degrade us even more to the point that this is what Smeagol looks like now, as he's been under the influence of the ring for, by this point, centuries. So much so that it's actually divided his personality in half. There's the evil Gollum, and then like what's left, that remnant of the Smeagol.
Smeagol using his nerve. No, not. Never. Smeagol hates mercenaries. Smeagol wants to Smeagol. Dead. And rewritten. Smeagol did it once. He could do it again. We must get it back. Patience. Patience, my love. First, we must lead them to her. To the winding star. Yes. Stars then. Up the stairs we go. Until we come to the tunnel. And when they go in, there's no coming out. She's always hungry. She always needs to feed. She must eat. All she gets is fruity oxes. And then it doesn't taste very nice, does it, precious? Not very nice at all. My love. She hungers for sweet meats. Her weight meat. And when she throws away the bones and empty clothes, then we will find it and take it for me. For us. Yes, we live for us. There. Where? Precious baby eyes. That's the hobbit says.
So in order to try and finish this in 20 minutes, I'm going to try and fly through this really quick. So here we go. We have, what we've seen is the corruption of Gollum, of Smeagol into Gollum. This was the slow, steady march, slow, steady pace of his own exposure and being under the influence of the ring. Now there's another circumstance here where there's also someone who is slowly put under influence, someone who becomes corrupted through another means, and that is the subtle means of, through the magic, if you will, of Sauron, through his agent, Grima Wormtongue, who uses his position as the chief advisor to the king of Rohan to slowly bring Rohan under the authority of Sauron. What we do, of course, is that this is the corruption of speech, the corruption of truth.
I cannot allow you before Theoden King so armed and upgrade him. By order of Grima Wormtongue. Gustav.
Oh. No, you would not part an old man from his walking stick.
My lord, Gandalf the Grey is coming. He's a herald of woe.
The courtesy of your hall is somewhat lessened of late. Theoden King.
He's not welcome.
Why should I welcome you?
hour in which this conjurer chooses to appear. Not spell I name. Ill news is an ill guest.
Be silent. Keep your forked tongue behind your teeth. I am a person found dead to barely create words with a witless womb. Stop.
I told you to take this and stop.
Son of Finger. Too long you sat in the shadows. I would stay still if I were you. Hearken to me. I release you. Spell. You have no power here, Gandalf the Grey. I will draw you, Saruman, as poison is drawn from a wound. If I go, Theoden dies. You did not kill me. You will not kill him. Rohan's mine. Be gone.
May Bernard Hill rest in peace. Corruption, of course, when we expanded into not just an individual understanding, but when we move into understanding of the corruption of peoples, that is where we run into this idea of. So this is where we get Numenor. This is where we get Mordor. So Numenor was a great civilization given to men. This is well before the Lord of the Rings. The quick and dirty story is that the men who fought against Melkor were given a giant island in the middle of the sea. This is Numenor. They were given an extraordinarily long life compared to other men because as a reward for helping to defeat Melkor. Eventually, after a number of thousands of years, they got more involved in their own sense of who they were, and they got tied up in this idea that they ended up fearing death, which forced them to send a ship to attack the land of the Ainur. That didn't go so well. The Ainur sunk the island into the sea. There were a number of refugees they were called the Faithful. They escaped to what is now Gondor and Arnor up north, but that's not featured in the movies. When a whole people can become corrupt, when the elite who dominate over a people and their understanding of who they are slowly shifts, that we now have, in the very beginning, speaking of the idea that the children, that men were the preferred or were the favored of Iluvatar, the ones who are able to free themselves from the cycle of the cycle of Middle Earth. They free themselves through death to return to Eru. And before this point, it's referred to as the gift of men. Death is the gift of men. It frees you from the cycle of being stuck in Middle Earth, to diminish, that you are now able to return from where you came. But Sauron works his way in, corrupts the leadership of the island kingdom, which then trickles down to the point where the vast majority of the Númenóreans no longer view death as gift, but death as, well, death. Curse. They want to live forever like the elves. So they sail west to attack Valinor.
Well, it doesn't make sense.
I'm sorry?
They fear death, yet they're going to die.
Well, no risk, no reward. I guess. I don't know. Yes?
And wasn't the Númenor being sunk, wasn't that the only intervention that Ilúvatar had in the, he never bothered all the events that happened up to this point, the Valar wanted him to intercede and do stuff. He's like, no, you guys deal with it. And then they actually started worshiping Sauron, and they were basically blaspheming against the gift.
Right.
And that's the only time that Ilúvatar actually was like, no, you guys gotta go.
Right. Yes, exactly. So he's the one that sunk it, and then he's the one that bent the earth so that it was that's basically how it came round, but it separated Valinor away so that it could never sail again to Valinor. You can't sail, you can no longer sail into the paradise where the gods live. Yes. So yeah, and the closest thing you're ever going to see to religion inside the world is the Ainulindales at the very beginning, and this story of Númenor, because there is one place. It's a high mountain in the middle of Númenor that can be seen, where there is a temple of worship for Eru. Eventually, the kings shut it down. No one goes there. And that's where they start to set up this worship of Melkor, I believe it is, based on Sauron's influence, and that's when away it went. Mordor is this place right here. That's where Sauron is. He's the lord of this area that wants to be this area. It's horrible in there. Completely corrupt, completely devoid of anything. There's no green, there's nothing. All there are there's orcs. And so this whole area, it's just bad. It's what happens when the Dark Lord rules over a place for centuries. It becomes bad. And we've seen Isengard. Isengard was given to Saruman as a reward for all of his help originally with the kingdom of Gondor and the people of men, the kingdoms of men. And of course, it was once green and wonderful and awesome, and well, we saw what happened to it. Which is part of a larger sense of the things that are going wrong, which is this idea called the marring of Arda. Arda is the world, that's the whole created world here. So with Melkor's rebellion, all of creation was wounded. It was created good, but it too suffered the effects of Melkor's first rebellion. So if we understand this, stepping back, it recognizes that sin is not just an individual experience. Sin has conditions that affect, or has certain consequences that affect all of those around us, including the world itself. That Tolkien's world was created good and it was beautiful, but it is broken because of sin. That this is probably the closest you're going to see of a parallel in this world and in ours of the fall itself. So, to wrap it all up, here's the pattern of evil that we see in Tolkien. Creation is good. We are given freedom. Freedom leads to rebellion. Rebellion, rooted in pride. Pride becomes possession. Possession becomes domination. Domination corrupts persons and societies. So, I ran out of room. Creation is good, but we are endowed with a freedom which allows us to rebel. Rebellion begins in pride. Our pride becomes possessive of the things that are there that we claim as our own. And that possessiveness will mature to the point that will lead us to domination. Domination then will corrupt our society, our worlds, the speech that we use, so that evil spreads by desecrating what is good. And it all begins with Melkor. So, evil does not make, it corrupts. It does not give being. The deepest wounds in the world come when creatures who are meant to receive, who are meant to love, seek to possess, to dominate, and to deform. And that's the evil that is present in Tolkien's world. And of course, we can see, as we've seen throughout, going back again to the first session, this is probably the closest we're going to have to allegory, if you will, but it is not meant to be allegory. It is shot through with these Catholic themes of understanding. It's a world that is shaped, a world that understands itself in light of what the church teaches. This is the Catholic imagination at work. Questions?
Well, I think what you just wrote down, it may be from Lord of the Rings, but this is here and now.
Mm-hmm. And that's the beauty. So she said this is here and now. And I think that's the beauty of a story. Well, you know what I mean. It's the beauty of a story and what he's getting at when it talks about applicability. That it's a story that speaks to the heart and that we can see echoes of it even in our modern day, which is what Scripture does. That even though it's written thousands of years ago, there are still echoes of the truth that we see in our own day, in our own world. That's why we can still read it and it can still speak to us, because it is applicable to our life. And the more that as he would say, the more that the sub-creator of the fairy story gets to lived experience, the easier it becomes to dive into the world, meaning that we can then glean and see the truth in the story that we can then use in life.
I thought reading it from the beginning was, this made me think of
Adam and Eve. Yep.
I mean, everything made me think of that.
Yep.
Corruption there, of trying to basically take over God's world, which is not going to happen, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And I've seen different parts of reading different things, like when after Jesus crucified and going underworld and bringing people that were there that shouldn't be there and took them out.
Yeah, that's
Different things reminded me of that.
yes, that's so. Speaking of like seeing echoes of it in Scripture, the after Christ's crucifixion, what's been called what's referred to in the tradition as the harrowing of hell. When in the Apostles' Creed, where it says he descended into hell, where he went to reclaim those who were meant for heaven, but because the gates of heaven were closed based on the first sin, they were in a state of like waiting, essentially.
Makes me think sometimes, do people really realize, do they think about this? Do they pray about this, what Jesus actually did for us? What he did for us?
Yeah. That's beautiful reflection, absolutely. I can't hear you.
I think that some of these bigger, like, epic stories, like, we want to hear you. Like, Lord of the Rings, or Star Wars, or Harry Potter, or some of these other stories where you have these villains that mimic some of, like, the worst in humankind in, like, this, like, post-Adam world. Like, do you think that's why, like, some of these stories are, like, so interesting for people, because like we see some of like ourselves reflected back in that, and it's a little bit uncomfortable, and we can like watch it from a distance, or like I don't know, I'm just like thinking about how like there's groups of people who have like little fan followings to some of these villain sides, and you think like why would you?
Yeah, that is interesting that there in every sort of like epic or whatever, there's always this, connection that some certain people will make to the dark side. The people, like, they even just looking online, they sell shirts and T-shirts and everything that are like plastered with Sauron's image from the movies. There's a guy that I used to work with when back before I was ordained, where he was super like connected, like involved, and like oddly, weirdly connected to like Decepticons from Transformers. Yes. Like, that is an interesting phenomenon that I hadn't really thought about. Go ahead.
Just to take off that, because what you have up there on the board there, you go from freedom and not very far from rebellion. And how close are we to all wanting to rebel in some way, right? So when you have these evil characters, if you disconnect that from what you're truly rebelling against at the heart of it, God, then you have rebellion against other authorities. And we can always gravitate towards an authority that we're like, we would like to put that one aside. So there's that, especially the Decepticon type thing. You're like, you kind of gravitate towards like, not so much the evil of it, but just the rebellion aspect. So you're just feeding on that element of freedom that kind of dances outside of that. So I think that's all they're really trying to do at the heart of it, is just take that freedom to a rebellion state and go, no, we're not going to go any further than that. We're not going to go all the way to pride, possession, and all the way to corrupt world. We're just going to stay at rebellion. So you pick the evil character and you're like, yeah, I'm not going to gravitate towards all the other good Harry Potter characters. I'm going to pick the evil one, and that's my t-shirt.
Right.
So it seems mundane, or just kind of not really harder than anything, but you're dancing right along the line of down towards corruption. I don't think they realize it. Yeah.
I think a lot of the time too that, like, for storytelling aspect, the villains are usually the most interesting, because I don't remember where I read it a long time ago. It said villains kind of mirror ourselves. They see like the bad, like our predisposition to want to sin and be rebel, and like the best villains are the ones that can understand why their motivations and why they would, like, if it's so well like orchestrated or whatever, like you would be like, oh, I would never do that, but I like understand. And I think this is the trap that we fall into, is people, what we think what we understand is one thing, but what's true is something completely different. Like, we can't, as humans, understand fully God's plan and why He allows things, but like there's this part of us we thirst for knowledge why things are the way they are, and a lot of like the villains and stuff, like stories like that, are the ones that try to have these things that, oh, is that truthful? Is that like a real thing? But they're just being deceiving, and like you said, Sauron makes his own will. So, and then we kind of are like that too, in our own way.
And connected to that, I think, and I think we've been seeing a lot of this in the last 15 or so years, is the like a prominence put on like the anti-hero, where it's that like the Dark Knight Rising kind of thing, where it's Batman is not like your Adam West, TV's Adam West, but like is this very dark character doing good, like flawed. It's an interesting experience, I think. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm kind of seeing that Tolkien is giving ideas personality, so that they're more relatable. That maybe we can see ourselves in some of those ideas.
Oh, okay. Yeah, interesting. That he's giving personality to an idea that we can then see and reflect on. Yeah, absolutely. I can see that. Go ahead.
Along with that, so if the opposite of rebellion is service, Sam and Faramir were protected from the corruptive power of the ring because they served others for that higher good.
It's a beautiful point. That the movies treat Faramir very dirty, by the way. Faramir is the brother of Boromir. And the movies treat him real dirty from the books. So, but you're right, because it is in the entire encounter with, as we move through the entire epic of the Lord of the Rings, there are really only 3 characters that at any point in time can resist, don't necessarily fall into the trap of the ring. And it's Faramir, it's Sam, and well, he's not really tempted with it. It's yes, Tom Bombadil. Thank you. I'm like, I don't know why I'm blanking on his name. Who's not in the movies? Yeah, well, Tom Bombadil is not in the movies, which is more the pity.
Don't forget Sam has to use the ring to save Frodo.
That is true. He is considered a ring bearer. So like he is the one who has used the ring but has never actually fallen to its whatever. Interesting. And I like that connection to service. And what's if we put it back together, then what's the idea that our own Satan, it's non serviam, I will not serve. Thank you very much.